I'd say just take a chance. Like, that's what I say about a lot of things, but we hesitate so much when we're put outside our comfort zone and we want to stay in our little bubble. But like, honestly, when you get out of that and when you just like ask for help from someone, plenty of people will like reach out and take your hand and like give you that help you need. And honestly, talking to people is like the best thing ever. Like literally during the whole pandemic, when I was working, just talking to someone for 15 minutes during a day would shift my attitude completely. So
I can understand that mentality because I had it for such a long time. You know, therapy, I've never encountered Black therapists until now. And so, yeah, you can think that therapy is for white folks. And for a long time it was, you know, but don't be shy to be able to talk. You know, that's really one of the advice I have. Because with Black therapists, you're going to be able to express yourselves in a different way. And sometimes talking to a stranger is so much easier than talking to your peers.
For someone who might be hesitant about therapy because of how white it is, I mean, first of all, like, I get it. Like, that is a very valid fear, very valid reason to be hesitant. And especially in our community where it's like you look back on a history of medical care that was so violent and so like it was not put in place for us. It was never like, oh, you know, like we are serving you. It's like you can access this, but we're also still gonna like, you know, do our thing and you know what that is. So yeah, it's very easy to kind of fall into that, like, okay, I'm just not going to reach out to anybody because, you know, but at some point you have to, I guess, like, say, like, okay, I need to help myself. I need to find healing for myself and be cognizant that, you know, there are some people, some therapists who are not going to be great, but there's also that chance that you could find someone who really works for you. And that's what I'm talking about with the connection. It's like, you know, not so much qualifications and that sort of thing, but like you might find somebody who might work for you and who might just like, it just clicks. So yeah.
A 2018 survey conducted by the Mental Health Commission of Canada noted that 60% of the participants expressed that they would more likely use mental health services if they had access to Black health professionals.
I feel like Côte des Neiges would probably be a good area. That's where I go to school. And I know, well, I feel like there's like still a good Black community here in general. So yeah, I feel like it's a good place. It's like 40 minutes from my house by car, so it's okay.
I think it would be anywhere in the southwest of Montreal, somewhere where it can be accessible either by metro or public transport or any type of public transportation or by car, but also where there's a concentration of Black people to be able to access it easily as well. Because we want it to be somewhere where they can feel that, you know, if they don't have the means to get to it, if they need to walk, they can. But ideally, maybe somewhere in LaSalle or even around here, like the Lennox Atwater area, I think that would be cool because it's along 3 major metro lines, I think. Definitely, absolutely. Because it's just in terms of kind of seeing myself reflected across from me, whether it be via like Zoom or whatever. It's just someone I feel like if I express something, it may not be the same thing she's experienced, but she can still nod and be like, yes, this is absolutely valid. Versus me talking to a white woman. Yes, maybe we both identify as female. That's all well and good, but me talking about microaggressions I experience at work as a Black woman, you could tell me and it's going to be like an empty or like empty empathy, just trying to kind of validate my feelings without actually validating my feelings, and kind of trying to find clinical terms to justify why this is like it's happening. and not just saying this is a real thing and you don't deserve it, and it's okay for you to vent and say it's not appropriate. And if, let's say, I'm scared to take this further, either with HR or to a manager or whatever, like, I don't know if a white mental health professional would be able to give me the strength to be like, it's okay for you to go and do it. I feel like they would tell me to try and kind of deal with it, and try to justify why the person was like giving me these microaggressions, rather than just tell me this is just not normal and inappropriate, and you should be able to speak out about it without feeling like there's going to be some kind of repercussions, if that makes sense. So I just think in terms of just being able to relate to someone, it would have been, I think I probably would have gone a lot sooner rather than later.
In their research, Aiden et al. Found that 71% of their participants agreed that having a culturally aware workforce would encourage them to access mental health services.
They know what healing can do to us, you know? They've gone through that process themselves, and so when you're face to face with them, when you're talking, you don't feel judged, you don't feel like what you're saying doesn't make any sense, because they understand. They've certainly gone through some of those experiences themselves, you know, being marginalized and casted aside and living in a society that wasn't built for them, you know, that was built to keep them out. And so I think that having that relationship is amazing. You can be able to be uncannily yourself. Yeah.
I think it is very important. I mean, everyone's going to do it at their pace, of course, but I do think it is a worthwhile discussion to have, because I also think there's some kind of distance that can unintentionally be formed between child and parent, but also not only that, it also informs their relationships outside of the family dynamic. And because we have to go through so much, unfortunately, on a day-to-day basis, I mean, it's something that I feel would just be beneficial for everybody, from the parent's perspective as someone who has the experience, to be able to kind of explain all of this to a child, versus a child trying to discover all of this as they're growing up and having more and more questions, or kind of just shutting things down and putting it aside and saying, well, this is just the way life is, because that's what they're told. Like outside of the home, like you can't control what's being told to your child at school. And if they're kind of just told, well, no, that person didn't mean it, it's okay, you're still friends, but it's like, no, that's not okay. Like when I think back to like my childhood, some of the comments that I got from like my white friends, it's just like, yeah, we were all laughing, but I was laughing because I just couldn't put two and two together, because why would this person I grew up with say anything like that and it'd be technically racist? But if I was comfortable enough or had that kind of conversation at home with my parents, I don't think it would have, I would have reacted the same way. And of course, there were little things. If I had questions about certain words that were said, yes, my parents would explain it to me. But in terms of being like, yeah, but this really hurt, and, I'm not okay with this, it's kind of just like, well, your parents console you, but it's not in the way that, it would have been had I been able to speak with like my parents and them could be like, well, it's okay for you to not be okay, but instead of like, well, it'll pass kind of thing. I think my first instinct would be, let it go. It's okay. You're not alone. You're human. And, we are here for each other in the ways that we can, but just let it go. That's all I could say. And it's not our responsibility. And it might be selfish to say, but I think the only responsibility we have is to ourselves. We don't owe it to anyone to constantly be strong. We don't owe it to society. We don't owe it to the higher beings. I think first and foremost, if you can take care of yourself, then you'll be able to take care of other people. And I feel so often we put ourselves last and try to uphold everyone else around us. But it's okay. We've done enough. We've done enough. I just think it's long overdue. I mean, it should be something we're allowed to have. I think it's common for us to be able to open whatever spaces we want to, and even whether it be for healing or other. But I think it's just very important because it's one of the many resources that we lack. And I think maybe timing wasn't right. Maybe it was just in terms of space or just amount of interest. But I think it's something that we deserve just to have to call our own to kind of recuperate mentally, physically, emotionally.
Because of peace, because it will bring us peace. It will bring us happiness. It will heal us, you know, absolutely. It will bring us together, and together we can heal. You know, we can move forward, we can contribute, community is at the center of how we move forward and how we will progress. And so with the Black Healing Center, I think that we can actually come together, bring each other peace in the hard times, that just like last year when we were going through all those hard times, we'll be able to, you know, move forward with that. Absolutely.
Well, because nobody else is doing it for us. Like, I'm a consultant on the anti-racism task force at Concordia, and so it's just a lot about like, what do you think we can be doing better and stuff like that. And I'm like, there's just so much that could be done better, and nothing is being done about it. Like, you know, I'm also Indigenous, and so like I'm thinking of like the Indigenous communities here that I work a lot with, and just like, you know, one of the things I think is easiest in terms of like equity work for university, at least, is like Indigenous students shouldn't be paying to go to school. So that's just something I could feel that academic institutions should already be putting in place. And so then I'm reflecting that on, you know, Black folk. I'm just like, you know, there should be a lot more scholarships. Like, I feel like for Black healing, like, people really need to understand the difference between equity and equality, and they don't. I feel like they're always just like, let's make sure that they have equal opportunity. So it's like, if we're gonna hire 6 people, that means 3 people at least have to be Black, and then 3 other people can be whatever. But they don't think about the background of that. It's just like, okay, so you're gonna hire somebody, but on your requirements, you're gonna say you need 4 years of experience, you need an undergraduate degree in this, you need to be like super skillful with Excel, Google Suite, and all of these things. And I'm like, that's not equity. And you need equity in order to make these opportunities equal. Because if you're trying to include Black people, you need to understand that most of them probably haven't had access to education. The money they make is not going towards their savings. It's either there to help their family or to help them pay off their debt, or just to help them live and just buy the very minimal things that they need to exist in this world. You know, they're drowning in debt and all of these things. They live really far. So it's like, if you're really, really interested in making equal opportunities for Black folk, you have to understand everything else that comes with it. And like, you know, let's say this is like the ground. When we're thinking about equity, you have to understand that like, we're not starting at the ground. We're starting underneath the soil. So you got to do all the work to get us from there in order to get us here to have the equal opportunities. And I don't feel like institutions necessarily like acknowledge that. They're just like, oh, here, we're going to give a scholarship. But it's like, okay, but are you gonna like offer financial literacy, or are you gonna even just writing literacy so people can properly apply? Like, where are you advertising these scholarships? For example, like last week, my partner, and she's white, she forwarded me a scholarship for Black students. I had no idea this was there. And I'm like, who's advertising this? And where are they advertising this? Or like a few years ago, I went to a Roxanne Gay event. Yeah, McGill. They were hosting a Roxanne Gay talk. So, and I was just like, what? How did this happen? You know, if this is an event for Black people, why didn't you offer honorariums so people could take off work, you know, so that they could attend? Did you book buses so people can, you know, have accessibility to get there on time? Like, a lot of Black people live very far. They live in like North Montreal, or far in La Chine and La Salle. So it's like all of these things weren't thought for. It's like, oh, well, it's a Black event, but nobody came. And it's like, but you didn't do the extra work. Like, this isn't enough to just say, like, here's Roxanne Gay, come attend. Like, have you thought of all the reasons why we can't attend, why we don't go to these events that you're putting on for us? Like, what do we have to put aside in order to attend this event? Like, are you providing aid for those things? Because we would love to go, but are we going to miss work for this? I don't think so. If we have to study because we have to work tomorrow, are we going to not study so we can go see Roxanne Gay? I don't think so. How much money does it take for us to get there? And are you going to like provide that so that we don't miss on that? So it's just like all of those things. Like when you're thinking about like improving like our experience and like our opportunities, you have to think about all of those things. And they're not thinking about those things, but Black people do. So that is why we need spaces that are run by Black people to help Black people, because they understand really deeply like what needs to be done in order to get them to where they need to be. And I think it's going to take a lot of work for Black folk to necessarily educate non-Black folk on how to do these things. And even at that, I don't even think that's our job, you know? And if we're lacking resources, that's what you can do. You can give us the money so we can run these centers. You can give us the money so we can go get educated to run these centers. You can give us the money so that we can go to a grant workshop so we know how to apply for grants to run these centers. You don't have to do it. That's not what we're asking, you know? So I think that's why we need spaces like this, because, well, other people don't experience what we experience, and they don't necessarily know what we need and how to get there for us. And you know, their way of planning might work for people like them, but it might not work for us because we're very different. So
it's going to be a great addition to the community. Like, it's going to serve so many people in so many ways. And I think we need it because we don't have anything else like that out there. And especially, like, speaking particularly for this city, yeah, we really don't have something as like comprehensive as that. So yeah, I just looked at some of the things that you're planning, and I really like am optimistic about it, and I'm sure other people in the community are really looking forward to it. So
I've been getting into plants. Like, I mean, I only have a balcony, but it's okay. And just being able to kind of take care of the plants, and kind of the act of repotting and watering and changing soil and just doing that, it's a way to release stress, and kind of because it looks nice too. Like, it looks nice, it feels nice. Since we don't really have a lot of green spaces where we live, at least it'll be my kind of own little private oasis. And I've been doing that, trying to unplug my phone, from my phone, I should say, every once in a while. So at least maybe an hour or two. I mean, I can't help it. I am glued to my phone like everybody else, but at least trying to remind myself to kind of put it in a separate room and go somewhere else and do something else. Also, just taking naps as well, and resting when I need to rest instead of trying to stay up and kind of fight the heavy eyelids. And, you know, just kind of, like I said, just being conscious of me and trying to be in tune with like the signals that my body's giving me. And like I said, no in the beginning, saying a lot of no as well, and not trying to justify my actions as well. Like, if I don't want to do something, I'm not going to try and find something to add on to why I can't do something. It's just, that's it. I'm putting up my barriers, and that's that. And that's what I've been doing so far. And this has been over the course of the year. So it's work in progress, but I like where it's going. So it's probably going to be long term.
Sleep, you know? No, but like I have like a sleep debt that's like been piling up. And so sleeping and just relaxing, you know, turning off all social media, turning off my emails, and just saying, I'm taking a break, taking a pause. That's how I self-care. It's really important for me so that I can, you know, when I jump back in, I'm ready, you know, and I'm ready to attack the day and start over again.
I didn't really realize that like racism was a thing until I was like 18. You know, I like had my first sociology class in CEGEP at Dawson, and they like showed us the video of like the children, and they choose which baby doll they want, and there's a black one and a white one, and like all of them choose the white one, and I was just like shook. I was like, I remember going into the metro after and just like looking like at all the advertisements, and I was like, there's no black people. Oh my God. And I'm like, it just like blew my mind. Like I was like, oh my God. And I was reflecting on like my high school experiences, and like, you know, I was like, oh my God, when that substitute teacher told me to like go back where I came from, I'm like, that was a racist comment. Like I didn't even clue in there. I was just kind of like, okay, you know. And when the boys would used to be like, oh, you look like Whoopi Goldberg or Lil Wayne because I had braids, but they had no idea that braids were different than dreads, and you know, or twists. And I'm like, you know, all of those things that affected me, and like wanting to straighten my hair like as soon as I could, and like having my hair fall out after that, and restarting the grind process, and like loving my own textures and stuff like that. Like those were all things I think that I thought was just like a part of high school and like being a teenager. But then having had that class and then just like learning a lot about different like theories and sociology, I was like, oh, wait a minute, like this is unique to my experience and not to a lot of the other people like experience that I went to school with. And, you know, like things like when people would ask if that the only other black boy in my high school, if he was my brother, and I was like, we don't look anything alike. Like, no, he's not my brother. And like, I didn't think about that until I was 18, you know, and being like, oh my God. So growing up, it wasn't really a thing for me. I wasn't scared. I wasn't really aware of that stuff, you know. But after that, I was hyper aware, and that was really, really interesting. And yeah, I definitely think most of it started happening when I started attending university, and it makes sense to me now because I feel like post-secondary academic institutions are really just a replication of society in the highest form. Like, so, you know, teachers who are calling Africa a country, but, you know, these people have PhDs and they're teaching biology, and I'm just kind of like, I have to correct them and be like, Africa's a continent, and there's so many countries, and they're nothing alike. They all have different cultures, different religions, different tribes, different languages. So things like that, or like, you know, having professors who aren't kind of understanding your circumstances. And yeah, but I feel like I most of the time after I realized, it was more of like, oh, I'm angry about this, and it was like, how can I address this? And it was like, go, 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 go. But then when COVID hit, it was more of like, oh, wow, no, I'm just sad about this. And now I'm feeling all the pain of this. And it's a lot. And now I'm just exhausted. I'm exhausted by being Black. And like, it was really the beginning of COVID where I was just like, I'm not making any more white friends. Like, I have enough. And now I just need to make an effort to find people more that look like me, where it's just easy to be in that space and where I can just, you know, feel safe. Because, you know, I have like, you know, 3 of my closest friends are white people who I trust very, very much. And like, you know, I would trust them with bringing them into a circle of friends that are just primarily non-white. But the chances of something happening and that affecting me like severely are just too high now. And it's not something that I think is worth my time anymore. So yeah, moving forward, I've like, in the past like 6 months, I've just been like consciously being like, this is not something that I want to deal with or reinforce. And if I have the opportunity to not deal with it, then I'm going to. Whereas before, it was just kind of like going with the flow. And I think like that's changed a lot for me. In the Black community, I think there's a lot of homophobia, and especially being a Black femme, there's just like a lot of misogynoir, and from our own people. So when I think of safe spaces, it's really unfortunate to say, and it hurts me to say this, but I'm not including men in that. And I'm like specifically Black men. Like, you know, as someone whose best friends are like dark-skinned Black women, like I've seen the pain that they've gone through being that, and, you know, being rejected by people who have gone through the same experience as them. And so when I think of safe space, I'm thinking predominantly like femme presenting, gender bending Black folks, where, we're open to having conversations and also understanding that like we're not a monolith and we all have different opinions and they're all valid. And as long as we can have like an open conversation about it and just being there to support each other, I think a space where it's understood that we might come from different walks of life and that's okay, and we're just here to have a good time and enjoy each other's company and talk about things that concern us or that have bruised us in the past, and to feel safe to communicate those things to each other. I think that's what a safe space for me in terms of community is. And I would love for one day to get to a space where I can feel confident saying like that includes Black men, but at the current moment, from my personal experience, it doesn't to me.
Well, that's the thing. Just because we didn't talk about it enough, and I had so much struggle with, self-doubt and thinking about, am I good enough? All those questions that I was asking myself, I needed to express that, and my parents weren't giving me the answers that I wanted, and so that's when I decided to seek therapy. Best decision of my life. I do not regret it at all. And through the therapy that I was getting and discussing about all my issues, I was able to understand that this is something that our community needs. We need to be able to express our anger and our tears and also our successes, I'm happy. I want to talk about it, And so, as I was sitting in my psychology classes, and I realized that there was never that angle towards Black folk and all our struggles and successes. And so that just led me towards continuing in that path and hopefully creating, dialogue about our issues with mental health, but also how we can remedy to those issues. Yeah. One of it was myself, because, you have this preconceived notion that from the years of not talking about it with your closest peers, that mental health is like a sign of weakness. So for me, when I decided to take that leap, I was also extremely scared and skeptical as well. Is this going to help me? Am I paying, why am I paying for this and stuff like that? But in the end, it ended up being a great decision. In general, I think that a great barrier to mental health, seeking counseling is the money, the cost. It's really expensive, and certainly for folks of color. And so that's something that we should really be working on, closing that gap, because, absolutely. No, I had a terrible experience with school counselors. When I was about 15 years old, I went to a predominantly white high school, and the white folks at my school thought that it was okay to use the N-word leisurely. And I went to complain. It was the first time that I stood up for myself, and I went to complain to to the principal. And she sent me to the school counselors, and she sent me. I was like, I don't need counseling. This is y'all's problem. But she sent me to the school counselors, and the counselor told me, maybe you're just stressed. Maybe, you're thinking about it too much. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm the only Black girl in the class. I am experiencing violence from other students, and you guys aren't talking to these students. You're putting me in a situation where I have to doubt myself, doubt how I feel. And so from then on, I said, no, I do not want to seek counseling from school counselors, from white counselors, because they don't necessarily understand what I've been through. And so I made it a mission for myself to find a counselor who is a Black person, who understands the struggle, and who can understand how I feel being in a predominantly white space. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to, it's such a big issue that there's so much to start with. But I think that contributing to spaces like yours, you know, the Black Healing Center, or, you know, there was this organization that, you know, gives funds to Black folks. So they I forgot their name. Yes, Black Healing Fund. So they give funds to Black folks so that they can seek mental health. Those are the type of institutions that we need to uplift, you know. Those are the type of institutions that put Black people at the forefront. And so speaking about them in Parliament and speaking about them to other politicians, rounding up so that we can give the proper funding, because that's where the problem lies, is that we do not give the proper funding to the institutions that are actually putting us at the forefront. So that's where we can start by making a change. Absolutely. It's all about the money. It's always all about the money. I mean, yeah.
When I was seeing counselors and social workers, the bulk of my life has been, seeing mental health professionals who are predominantly white. Just because of where I grew up on the East Coast, Nova Scotia. It's very white, so pretty much all of my experiences until I came here were with other white people. And I feel like I was lucky enough to have seen professionals who were not so much well-meaning, but almost, you know, that step ahead where it's like, I'm well-meaning, but I'm also conscious, and I'm also, you know, educating myself, and I'm also thinking of like what my role is in this dynamic, and not trying to, you know, perpetuate any kind of like further like microaggressions that you deal with in your life, like that sort of thing. So I was very lucky to have white mental health professionals who were cognizant of that. And then when I came here, I'm still kind of in the process of finding a Black mental health professional, but also somebody who holds like a similar identity to me, like being Afro-Caribbean, being queer, hopefully someone who also is like knowledgeable about adoption and like all the trauma that comes from that. So it's a lot to kind of like, you know, like filter and like be like, okay, you need to check off this box. But I think overall my experience with seeking out mental health help has been positive. It's been helped me a lot in, like certain circumstances in my life, certain things that I've gone through. And so I definitely am a huge proponent for therapy, you know, seeking out help, you know, whether it's like a social worker, counselor, that sort of thing. Because you can get lost in, you know, the credentials, and sometimes that's not exactly what you need. You don't need, you know, a psychologist with 10 years experience and has this and that, you know, certifications. And although that's nice to have, it's also like, I think healing and finding mental health help is so unique, and it's so contingent on your own experience and what you kind of like find healing in a way. And like somebody who has all these credentials and like all this experience you just might not click. So I think for me that's an important thing. Like I need somebody who is experienced, is qualified, but also somebody who I can look forward to seeing.